We're getting closer and closer to the Calder Cup Finals. We're down to 4 teams now, and we had 3 Game 7s this past Thursday. I don't think you can ask more than that out of a playoff run in the AHL. Hi, everyone. T-Sibs with you, Vibes, and Dead Soul also with me tonight. Hopefully we hear from MG a little bit later on. But plenty to talk about as we reach the semifinal round now in AHLPSN. And we talk about the matchups between the Bears and the Crunch and Stockton and Wild. Plenty going on as far as some interesting matchups that we had this past week in the quarterfinals. And we are now at a point, guys, where it is, you've got some really good teams that are playing these games. And while we've had some good champions over the last couple of seasons, I think the playoff matchups that we have right now are some of the best I think we've ever seen. It's been a lot of really good teams and not too many surprises, other than Checkers being a surprise. But past that, it's been some solid teams who've been there all season long, and and they've been given a run too. Obviously with the Moose and Dead Souls team, they made it awfully tough on the Wild, who've now got themselves to the semis. But, a couple of those other teams that were sort of on the edge, the Checkers one round where they surprised, but not able to do it in the next round. And now we're down to 4 teams that, before the playoffs started, if you picked them, it wouldn't have been a big surprise. And I think that speaks to the talent level of these teams and how stacked they are from top to bottom.
Yeah, I think, these would have been the 4 teams. With the exception of maybe, I forget the goalie's name who quit for the Marlies. But, before that, you might have put the Marlies in it. But aside from them, if you were going to take 4 teams in the beginning, during the season, it probably would be these 4.
Yeah, without a doubt. These teams have been the top of their divisions throughout the season, and that's, for a reason. And these teams are going to be very exciting to watch. I think these are great matchups. They've been great matchups. They've been really good games so far. I'm very excited to see these 2 series come up, and ultimately, it's probably for sure one of the best that I think we've had on all the 4 seasons so far.
Mello, sorry, that's his name. It must be early onset. I apologize. I'm getting old.
Yeah, I think things would have been a little different possibly had he not quit. So,
well, what's amazing is when that happened, how it just seemed like the entire team struggled with that right away, and it happened towards the end of the year, and they were chugging along fairly well. So you lose somebody like that, and all of a sudden the chemistry and the confidence just went away from them completely, and the Sens, 4-1 in their series, pretty much beating them into the ground. It's amazing how quickly a few of these teams lose a player or whatever, or in the case of Cleveland, I hate to say their name again because I know I'll get reamed for it, changes in that team and how quickly that situation went downhill. We saw that a few times this year where teams made changes and just really faltered big time. And I don't know if that's a management issue. Is that a personality issue on the team? Maybe it's a little bit of both, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Sibs, can you stop talking about Cleveland? You're hurting my feelings.
The common denominator with all those teams is what you said, change. And the change came in different directions. Some with the send downs, some with the quits or the bans, and obviously some in-game tension with some of the teams. Perhaps the management was to blame with some of those things. Perhaps it was just the players, just revolting, or who knows what the situation was. That they were all very different, but the change that happened to each of those teams did not help any of them, and that's where they, find themselves today, out of the playoffs and in that situation.
Well, we move ahead to what we saw this past week with the quarterfinals, and of course the Bears sweeping the Pens. But let's talk about the other 3 series first. we'll start out in the West with the Checkers and the Wild, and that was a series where, again, the Checkers had nothing to lose. Quite honestly, they started out that series with a 4-2 win against the Wild in Game 1. Wild came back, won the next two, then the Checkers next two, and then of course the Wild closed it out with winning the final two to take this series. So Charlotte all the way up to a 3-2 lead in this series. Looked like they may wind up shocking everyone again, but again, unlike Cleveland, the Wild had a plan that they had from the beginning. They didn't veer from it, and they stayed focused on what they needed to do, and they took the final two games by 1 goal each. And so, first of all, let's give the Checkers a ton of credit for what they were able to do in these two playoff rounds. And before we talk about the Wild, I just think that it's funny, we see Zeus get a lot of crap in the shout box when he's in there. He tends to stir up a lot of garbage with his comments, and I think he certainly does that on purpose. You may not like him and his comments on the shout box, but you have to give credit where credit is due to a team and management who were able to put together a Checkers team that wasn't just going to lay down the first round and damn near took the second round and almost got themselves into the semis.
Yeah, and I give huge props to him, because the fact is he dealt with probably some of the most shuffling that I saw, that I at least noticed throughout the season, throughout the lines. I know he went through a lot of different goaltenders. There's people getting called up, sent down, all that kind of stuff, and it was not like a smooth ride for him. He had to do a lot of juggling and a lot of shuffling, but he overcame all of that. He was able to still build a solid team and be able to find the chemistry with those guys, and ultimately he had them climb to the third in the standings there. So I mean, that's just outstanding for him to do that in his first run as a GM in the AHL. So huge props to him.
I think he stepped in shit, but that's just me.
So you're saying he inherited a good situation? Is that what you're saying?
I think things just kind of went how they did. That's just my opinion.
I don't recall how many people he had on the roster from the
kind of like Skilled Python last season. I'm kind of convinced that the Checkers, I don't know, they just have something that goes their way, because I think both of those GMs stepped in shit.
Well, it's funny you say Skilled, because Skilled obviously is the head up in Carolina, and this is his team. So maybe he contributed to at least had some thoughts and opinions that helped out Zeus and Ducks fan. Yeah, by the way, Ducks fan Waterloo is the assistant and maybe one of the best AGMs in the league this season. Not only a really good player, we've seen him do that, but I think probably his contribution to what this team did and what decisions they made on players and who was playing where, I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I think maybe Ducks had a lot to do with everything.
And, I think they kept... Well, I know one of the players that stayed with them was Cheezus, who was their goaltender, who eventually got suspended, right? So one of the guys that they did wind up holding on to isn't on this team and hasn't been for a little while. So they found some damn good players on this roster, and were able to go against a roster with the Wild, where you see guys who have been tremendous contributors this year, with OMG Price in net, perhaps the best goaltender in the league. Getty Granite on the wing. Ryan was here on lefty. Zach H1. Just a stacked team, and the Checkers were able to stay with them. Not just stay with them, but get a 3-2 lead in this series and almost steal it from maybe one of the best teams in the league, maybe the team that could win this thing.
Yeah, for a while it seemed like they were gonna be able to pull another one, another rabbit out of the hat. Excuse these terrible puns, but it was a very wild series, and ultimately the Wild were able to put themselves in check and get it done. But for a while there, the way the games were going, it did feel, especially once it went past 6, I was saying to myself, "Wow, they're gonna do it again. They're gonna slay another beast in the wild." But didn't quite work out that way in Game 7. And Game 7 was a good game, and
Right.
that was another game that it really could have gone either way, honestly.
Yeah, it really could have an OT
Yeah.
OT win for either team. But
Yep.
yeah, no, the Wild have been the team to beat all season. They're a tough team. They've overcome so much adversity already, and they've just been together for so long that it's tough to beat teams that have that kind of chemistry and just know each other that well. And so, I mean, it's just the Checkers did excellent. They did a really good job. Obviously, both teams had a lot of fun in that, and it was a very close matchup throughout the whole series. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. And that Game 7, we watched it. We did it on air.
Right.
And the final play, I forget who it was hit through the middle. I think it was Zach. Was it Zach that scored that final goal? Anyway, whoever it was, that play was just it reminded me of like a real NHL sort of finisher, to where a guy just streaks up the middle and they hit him up the ice and he's in. It was a great play.
Yeah, I think that was Dangles. Dangles had a goal
Was it?
on
Okay.
in this game, in Game 7. And it was a 2-1 final for the Wild in overtime. Ryan was here, a goal and an assist, and had a nice shot from the point, if I remember correctly, that found its way past T-Bob. But that was a well-played game. You could say 2-1. Oh, that might have been boring. It was actually a very well-played game by two teams. Not a ton of shots, 13 for the Wild, 11 for the Checkers. But it was good play back and forth. We watched the Heat and the Stars, and while that game was close, and I believe that went into overtime as well, it was apparent that the Heat had the better of the play, and the Stars had opportunities that they took advantage of. But in this one, the Checkers and the Wild, the play in Game 7 was pretty even. Nobody was really dominating, and while it looked like the Wild at times were holding, we're doing well with puck possession, then eventually the Checkers would come back down and have a couple of good opportunities. So it was a tight game. It was one where there was no clear, and Vibe, you can throw in your opinion on this too. There was no clear evidence that somebody was really tilting the ice in the overtime. It was like anybody could win this game.
Yeah, and you actually just took the words literally right out of my mouth. I mean, that's exactly what I was just getting ready to queue up to say, is that there was no clear-cut team that was controlling play. It was, and in sort of disagreement with you, in a sense that I felt like from a fan standpoint, it was kind of a boring game. But from a student of the game, from an artsy sort of perspective, in the game of hockey, it was a masterful game on both ends, really.
Right.
And it wasn't until that late break where it was just a defensive breakdown real quick, and next thing you know, the puck was in the back of the Checkers' net. But leading up to that point, there was no real, you could not say, oh, this team's got it. It's only a matter of time. There was no way to really, decipher that and determine who was going to win.
Yeah, and the goalies, on both sides did really well throughout the series. That's hats off to them as well, because they made quite the games for their teammates and their opponents. Just holding them in there and keeping the scoring low. So that was made for some good hockey as well.
Well, Checkers management and players should be commended for putting up the fight that they did for the last 2 weeks in the playoffs. And unfortunately, there had to be a loser in that matchup, and the Wild will move on to the next round. And they're going to take on a Stockton team that also struggled in their series and really had to also play a Game 7 and while we figured the Stars would put up a good fight, that maybe Stockton could even take it in 6. I think I actually picked them for 7, but to be honest, in the back of my head, I definitely thought that there was a possibility that, as much as I did like the Stars, that Stockton had so much talent that they could take this game. They could take the series in 6, but it did not turn out that way. It was a back and forth, win-loss, win-loss, win-loss kind of thing, and the Stars had gotten out. I'm sorry, the Heat had gotten out with a Game 1 6-2 win, and that one was not too impressive for the Stars, and it was definitely a game where the Heat showed great puck possession, a lot of patience with their passing, and able to really control that game. But and you thought maybe after that game that was going to be a really tough series for the Stars at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a series that I thought was, it's weird because Texas they've been a really good team all season, and they should have had everyone's respect, but going against the Stockton team, they really didn't have my respect personally, and I feel like they played a lot better than I personally expected them to, and it was just it was a good Game 7 that we saw, and it was a good series.
Yeah, there were only 2 games in the series that were decided by 1 goal. Game 4 was a 5-4 Stars win, and of course Game 7, the Stockton Heat winning 6-5. The other ones were by 3 and 4 goal differentials. So you don't typically see that in a playoff run. That might have been that may have been more because of maybe line matching worked out better in this series when you were able to have that ability to match up on lines. But really, Stockton had the first 2 games, and those 2 games had a 3 and 4 goal difference with 2 different winners. Same thing for Game 3 and 4. So I mean, I think it just happened that the right line happened to play against the right other line and be able to dominate in that series until we got to Game 7, and it was a really, I mean, you look at the lineup that started in this game for Texas: Crazy, Toasty, fucked up front, Steel City, and Apollo on defense, and Jeff Hooley, who's definitely been an incredibly hot goaltender for them this season, especially in the playoffs. Then on the other side for Stockton, Ryan R., Wally, Loops up front, Tenure and Biggie back on D, and then Trash Clown and Ned, who's been pretty hot all season too. So yeah, just going into this one, vibes, I remember we talked about the lineup before the game, and we figured this one was going to be a close one and could have a lot of action. I didn't expect a 6-5 game in this one, and if you watch the game, to me it was like there was a lot of good back and forth play, but where the goals came, some of them weren't necessarily off of great plays that were made to get into the zone and set up the play. Some of them were just by, a pass bounced off of somebody right in front on someone's stick in the slot, and and the opportunity arose that way.
Yeah, a lot of times it just seemed like the puck, found its way to where it needed to be for that particular team. And next thing you know, the puck was in the back of the other team's net. I mean, I felt like there were a few really good plays, especially on Stockton's end. I think it was Frost who scored that 1 goal. I'm pretty sure the puck went down low, and then he came, streaking towards the middle, and they hit him kind of like on a give and go.
Yeah.
That was a masterful goal, really. And I mean, it just. It was a good game. It was a good game, and I do think that they scored a couple nice ones. But yeah, kind of like you said, it was just sometimes the puck just ended up in the right place.
Yeah, it's just a different series overall. And for me, I mean, I guess it's not too surprising the way it went down. But I mean, the one surprise being, of course, the differential in goals for some of those games that were, pretty heavy on one side as opposed to the other. So of all the series that were going on, this is the one that I thought could happen this way. And moving forward for Stockton, they're going to have to be pretty careful to not let that kind of game happen with the Wild, because they will take advantage of every opportunity. And, we obviously know they're going to play a very defensive game. So the Heat, they're going to have to be careful coming up against the Wild.
Yeah, that's a series we'll get talking about later, and that's one, quite honestly, I'm going to when I give you the pick, that'll be the first time I've actually committed to it, because it's I've been going back and forth about that series, and we'll talk more about it in a bit. But there's just so much talent.
I am real quick. Got to cut in. I see the YouTube chat with their pitchforks out. I said Frost. I misspoke. I meant Loops.
Ah, well. Yeah, look, it's Pasta. So what do you expect? He's absolutely protecting his boys.
Put your pitchforks away, guys.
And and they're both guys. Him and Ryan are both yeah, picking on you a little bit here. So yeah, I think the Wild and Heat series is going to be a fun one to talk to in a little bit, and we'll get to that. But again, Stockton and the the Stars, like I said, we saw them a couple of times late in the season, and they were just tremendous. And I thought maybe a team that was quietly going into the playoffs without a lot of fanfare, and hopefully they have gotten some recognition after this series, because they just you look at the talent on this team. Again, they had Hooley and Reaper in net, and again two very good goaltenders. Reap didn't necessarily have a great playoff, but again, it's certainly a guy I would have on my team at any point. But that front line that we talked about in Game 7, and then of course Hacks, who's Duke, Kimmo, Fire Eyes, Eddie Drag, Crazy Native, Charbin as the AGM. Just a ton of talent up and down, and maybe again there's just so much talent in this league that teams like this might go a little bit unnoticed. But great job by the Texas Stars, and fuck their GM, Crazy, and Charbin, the two assistants on that team. Certainly had a great run there, and should be commended also for the team that they put together.
Why are you saying fuck their GM? What did he do to you?
He really needs to change his name. Calling that in the game all night too is just loads of fun. That's one of those things you don't hear Doc Emmerich say.
Yeah.
He doesn't have those kind of names to worry about. So, let's.
Fucked in front of the net. No, okay.
Let's talk about the Eastern Atlantic. Now we've hit the Western teams. Let's start with the Eastern Atlantic. The Pens and the Bears. The one thing. Look, I'm a Bear. I'm a Bear, obviously, but I have to ask this question, and it's already. I saw it pop up in the shout box today, and I'm shocked it hasn't been something we've heard more about in the shout box. But have the Bears faced a level of competition close to what the other three who made it in this semifinal have seen in the playoffs so far? Obviously, the Wild had to take on first a really tough Moose team that made them wake up, and then almost losing out to Charlotte. In this past series, Stockton had to play a tough Texas team, and of course, we saw some other, we saw some difficulty for even the Crunch, who had to play a Sens team that was, could have just as easily won that one. Did have the Bears not faced a good enough competition yet to say that they have a chance with the Crunch, and have they had it easier than everybody else? I'll throw that out to Dead Soul first, and then we'll let Vibes chime in.
Yeah, I would have to say that the Bears have not had the same level of competition in the playoffs thus far. I'd say that the other teams have gone against stiffer competition. Ultimately, not saying that those other teams are bad, but I mean, ultimately, if you do the comparison, there's no question in my mind that the Bears haven't really had the same kind of matchups, and I think you guys are going to have some trouble. At the same time, I think you'll do well against them, but I don't know. That's another series that I'm kind of scratching my head over, and I know that a lot of the people in the league seem to think that I think you guys have the upper hand. But if you look at some of the stats, which we'll get into a little bit later for this matchup, I'd have to lean on you guys having the lesser of the challenges.
Vibes.
With all due respect to the noise pussies and the Wattlebirds, absolutely not. They have not faced anywhere near the level of competition as the other teams in this tournament. And they're gonna definitely get their fair dose coming up here in the next series.
Well, the Bears, of course, sweeping the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton Penguins. Close first game, but then the next three, only allowing one goal to the Pens in each of those games. Winning the first game 5-4, and then 4-1, 4-1, and 7-1. And so I was absolutely surprised, and I played one of these games, but I was pretty surprised at how how they went down this way. They were a tougher team. They were right with us for a good chunk of the season, at least the first half of it, before we started pulling away. But I kind of felt like they still had tons of talent that could be a problem for this one. You look at their roster and they had a lot of good players on this team. Goaltending, Broadway CJ and Mason Goslin were both solid goaltenders all season long. And again, plenty of talent in and around. But I know, Vibes, you had a little bit of experience with this team. And maybe their defense was maybe a bit of other than the goaltending, maybe their team defense could have been part of the reason why they struggled.
Yeah, I definitely think it was, and I guess it's pretty evident that they were severely outmatched by the 4-0 series score. I gave them 2 games because I figured that their offense would be enough to at least get them 2 games. But they were definitely outmatched, and yeah, you hit it right on the head. Their defense was just absolutely atrocious. When you look at the series, I mean, through 4 games in this Bear series, they allowed 20 goals. But the flip side of that as well is they only scored 7. Whereas if you draw a comparison to the previous series where they took on the Providence Bruins, they had 19 goals through 4 games. Now, granted, they didn't win all 4 of those games, and the series went 6 games. But it's still a pretty big difference, 19-7 as far as goals scored in the 2 different series, respectively. But the big number is the 20 goals allowed for 4 games. I mean, it's 5 goals a game, so
yeah, that's
you're not going to win. You're not going to win if you allow that. I mean, I kind of was expecting it because I knew how I kind of want to be a little diplomatic, but bad the defense was for the Penguins. So, yeah, I expected it, but 5 goals per game is probably even more than I would have expected.
Yeah, I thought they were going to at least come out with 1 or 2 wins without a doubt, and a lot closer in games. I didn't think the scoring would be like this. At the same time, I mean, not to take anything away from the Bears, because they have a very good team all around, and they obviously can score. And as you can see, they did quite a bit. But I did give the Penguins having a little bit more of a, coming out with more of a fight than they did. So that was a little surprising to me with that series.
Game 1, which is the one that I played, they lose that one 5-4. What's interesting in that game is they get 23 shots off on us, and they had just brought up toilet cover earlier in the day, cleared him and put him on the roster because I forgot what D-man they lost, but they wound up having to bring him up and plug him into defense. Still put together a good game, and really were leading us in that one. Even through two periods, they were up 3-2. So they were making a game of that, and by the end of it, my feeling was, okay, this team is going to be a bit of a struggle. And then I don't know what happened the next 3 games, but they just did not come out and play the same way they did in Game 1. And I thought they put up a damn good fight in Game 1 and got their opportunities and made it tough for us, made it very tough for us. But for whatever reason, the next 3 games, of course, we wound up having Moose play those 3 games. And so it was, it was easy for us to have great D and a great goaltender in there. And that, I'm sure, contributed to it. But after that first game, they struggled.
Yeah. And they really just didn't show up offensively. I mean, the only guy who really did was Steele. He put up, I think he put up 3 goals in game one, for 4 points. But aside from him, 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal in the next 3 games. I mean, that's just not going to get it done when you're just scoring 1 goal per game. And man, you guys really put the shellacking on them.
Yeah.
Especially 7-1 in game 4. Oof.
Yeah, and we watched. I think we may have watched a little bit of that game 4. We were not here on there, but I think all of us were kind of watching a little bit of that. And yeah, at that point you could tell the Pens were, they were like, I think they were pretty much waiting for the clock to run out at that point, and it was done. So now we'll talk about the Bears and the team that they're going to wind up playing, the Crunch. But let's talk about that Eastern North matchup. And I know, Dedsel, you've been looking at Eastern North the entire time. And this Sens Crunch series, certainly we expected it to be one of the best. And it turned out that way, another 7-gamer.
Yeah, it was very back and forth with the Sens coming out on top in game 1, 7-2. So that was an interesting game to see that happen. Kind of sets the tone, and maybe some people thought, oh, wow, the Sens might just, have a really good start with this, and just maybe they'll just pile through these guys. But next game comes up 4-2 for the Crunch, and right after that, 2-1 for the Sens, and back and forth again, back to the Crunch for 2-1. And then the Sens take game 5, 6-5. So, I mean, these are all really, really close games, minus the game 1. And then you've got game 6 where they went 4-1 for the Crunch with the win. And, of course, game 7, 2-0 for the Crunch. It kind of went the way that I had expected and anticipated. I didn't think this was going to be a major scoring back and forth, except for, a couple of those games. But ultimately, this series was quite the series to watch. The Sens really did bring it, along with the Crunch, and the Crunch always had an answer, it looked like. But this was a series that was a little bit tough to call. I thought it was, leaning on the Crunch. Obviously, that's what I picked. But the Sens, great job, guys. You guys made some really good hockey. It really could have gone either way in Game 7, but the Crunch were able to take it home and move on to the next round.
I tell you, for the Sens, having to use an ECU in Game 7 is kind of rough. If they could have only used a roster player somehow or something, they could have maybe made a difference,
That's a good point to bring up, because I think we were, going to be discussing that for sure. But that is something that I was going to mention. That thank you for bringing that up. That they did have to use an ECU for their left wing. It looks like for that game. So that is pretty disappointing, considering that I guess with the rules as they're stated, that they could have swapped out their player, an actual roster player. So there was some confusion there. So I guess I'll let Sibs kind of get into that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I start trouble? I definitely didn't mean to.
Well, yeah, that's you mentioned that there's been a lot of talk in the handshake thread between the Sens and the Crunch. Started out cordial and didn't deteriorate too much. Actually, there was a pretty good discussion going on there, but certainly the discussion about the Sens needing to have to use an ECU as it was determined by the BOG, and there was some questioning. They knew that they were going to have to find somebody to replace, and the question was, well, what is the ruling? Can we still use one of our regular roster guys and be able to just pop him in there? And like you could do during the season, but there was some talk, maybe some misinterpretation of the rules. It's a really interesting discussion that's gone on in the last couple of days, and this thread started out on Friday and has been going on since then. So it's been a very interesting discussion, and This is something where again I'll say it before and I'll say it again. I know what LG management feels is that, look, we've had these rules forever on Xbox and we used them in another league at one point, and it's just because PSN is not used to them and they haven't had experience with these issues coming up, and so now when they come up, they have to, we have to work with them to help them understand what's going on. I totally disagree with that. It doesn't matter how long a league's been going on. If a rule is tough to interpret and it's brought up on and a discussion can be had where both sides can have a legitimate claim that this is what the rule really reads, then the rule was shit to begin with. And that's how I see it. And every season there are leagues, and again, you guys know this. There are all sorts of baseball, football, basketball, hockey leagues, professional ones, that look over their rule book every year, that take recommendations every year, and that not just recommendations on what to add, but what to rewrite, what to remove. Unless that is happening at least once a year, forget about every season, that's a bit much to ask, but if once a year there was a committee that probably could be headed up by the BOG, but also have some independent people be part of it and could actually say, hey, let's look over a couple of these things. We've had these issues this past year. Let's look over these rules and see if they need to be rewritten. If that's not happening, then we're not paying the right kind of attention to the rules, and we're not doing enough to make them better. And I think the way this one was read up, and you could look at this and you could say, oh, the single substitution rule does not apply to Game 7. Well, does that mean you don't have to do it, or does it mean that you have to? Again, it's how you read the rule, and it is still not clear. It needs to be written in a way that is incredibly clear, and the other part of that is during the season, we have rules in place for when the rosters have to come in. We still let things get bended because we want to be able to let things happen at the last second. I think those are the two things that are a problem here: the clearness of the rule and the inconsistency of following the rules throughout the entire season.
Well, I'm gonna play partial devil's advocate and say that I partially maybe semi agree with them in the sense that I do feel like the newness of the PSN side could play a factor a little bit, and maybe Xbox is a little bit more accustomed to it, so there probably are a few more issues on the PSN side. But that being said, the level of ambiguity in the rulebook is just ridiculous. There's certain things that if I change the tone of my voice, it could mean one thing, and if I change it back to a different tone, it could mean something else. The rulebook is terribly written, and it needs an overhaul. And to kind of build off of what you said, Sibs, it does. And to be fair, they're not getting paid for this, so I understand that, and I respect that, and I get it. But we're also not getting paid for this, and we put a lot of effort into it. And I feel like maybe they could ratchet up the effort a little bit in the sense of, yes, you do need to look things over. You do need to make sure that everything is up to speed and up to par and makes perfectly good sense and, can be read by the layman and be understood, because a lot of the rules are just, even if you read them 2, 3, 4 times, you still aren't exactly sure what it means.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked in that area as a BOG before, as you know, and my experience was exactly this, where something like this would come up, and I would have my interpretation. I'd have to read it 4 or 5 times to think, okay, this is it. Okay, no, it's not that. No, it's this. I'd ask somebody, they'd give me their answer, ask somebody else, and it's a different one. So everybody did have a different kind of idea of what it was, and so there was that ambiguity. But at the same time, I mean, it needs to be a rule like that. If you're going to have something like this, as important as it is, it needs to have like an IE, like an example. Wow, this situation, whatever. And there are different rules that do have those kind of examples, and I think it's necessary for a lot of them that are like this. And unfortunately, when you copy and paste rules from past things and you just kind of put it all together to make one big thing to just save on time, obviously that's a time saver, but it creates these kind of hiccups where you find that as you go through the seasons, there's going to be new GMs, new owners, and there's going to be some, obviously a new bog too. So, there's a lot to know, there's a lot to learn, and there's definitely a lot to argue about the way that it's set up. So there needs to be some time set up very soon to go through this. And I know they've done it. They've gone through a few different rules. They've gone through a few different things over each season. There has been some changes. There's no question that they're doing that, but they really need to go basically kind of with a magnifying glass and just kind of go bit by bit and word by word and rewrite it properly so that everybody can understand. And there's not anything that you can do to be like, oh, well, what about this or what about that? It's just layman's terms right there for you.
Yeah, and let's be honest. In a lot of ways, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. In this league, it's some people say it one way and then they say it the other way. I'm kind of repeating what you just said, but it's true. It's reality. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. So the bog ended up screwing this one up. But the plus side about it all is at least it wasn't man bear. So.
Well, shit rolls downhill too. So I mean, it comes to everybody has to play a role in it and just be able to step back and be like, okay, we admit there's an issue, let's resolve it, let's come together. And I know that the league has reached out in a number of different ways, and there's probably a few different ways they can do that to continue to change things for the better. And it needs to happen, because this kind of thing happening it's not good for the league or for the players involved in that situation.
I think it has to be the mindset of the people who are involved, and Vibes and I are, Vibes does software development, right? So and I do testing of software development. We're detail oriented people, and so when we see something that is a rule, look, we deal with requirements that are supposed to define how we write code, how we test code. It needs to be specific. It needs to be clear. I'm pretty sure Vibes feels the same way I do. When I look at the way these rules are written, I say this is like a business person wrote it in crayon. There is not nearly enough detail in here to really explain what is actually happening. If you read that one line, right? Each team is only allowed to make one AHL substitution per game. Okay. All other substitutions have to be in ECU. The single substitution rule does not apply to Game 7. A player who is subbed out of a scheduled game and replaced by another roster player must be scheduled again within the limits above 1 and 4, 2 and 6. Okay. But if it's Game 7, there is no 1 and 4, 2 and 6. So I'm not sure why that part was added in. It doesn't make any sense why that was added in.
It adds to confusion when you're reading it.
Absolutely.
It's what you call bad code.
Yeah. How do you look at that line and say that that's clear? It is not clear. Yeah. Plain and simple. It should say, it should be, here are the substitution rules. And if it's by specific game, if you want to have rules specifically to games 1 through 6 and rules for game 7, and then what is the substitution rule for using an ECU, for using somebody on the roster, that's how you break it down. It almost should be a grid right here telling you what you're allowed to do based upon what the situation is. And that's the level of detail the rules need. Not 2 lines that and half of that being somewhat vague and not really needed with the discussion that's being made for this rule. And it's such a big deal. Like ECUs and replacing players is a big deal. And it needs to have a specific section that is clear and concise and that doesn't need, after all these seasons, if these rules are so great after all these seasons, why do we have to call a bog to have it figured out? What we're doing is, and again, Vibes can he understands this part of it. This is like having user acceptance testing. You get somebody who didn't build this. You get somebody who hasn't looked at this code forever and ever, and have them look at the rules and say, what do you think of it? And they're the ones who are going to tell you, I don't have a fucking clue what this means. And you've been working on these rules forever, and you think it is clear to you, But somebody from the outside, and in this case it's all the PSN players, are saying, hey, I know you played with these rules for so long, but this doesn't make any sense to me. Those are the people you got to listen to, because they're looking at it with fresh eyes. And those are the ones that you want to believe have a good point.
Right. You only know it because you wrote it.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's basically it. But you need to be able to write it so that other people understand it.
Yeah. That's the only way to make it so that everybody does understand it, really.
And so, yeah, I know, I love I'm in good stead with the folks at LG, but I got to totally disagree with the idea that the rule book is perfectly fine the way it is. The covered wagon was very fine the way it was for many years, but eventually somebody realized it's a shitty way to travel, and we should find a better way to do things, and that's the way it is for everything, right? I mean, you can't think something is
evolve or die.
Yeah. You can't think something is golden forever and ever. You've got to revisit it, and these rules have to be revisited. So, okay, maybe this wasn't going to be a 5-minute discussion.
Sibs is on fire right now.
Really, yeah.
Ooh, baby, I'm impressed.
Man,
I might be a little bit turned on right now.
Good. Well, is that a microphone in front of you or no? Yeah, it's when it comes to rules and things being left up for interpretation, I have a huge problem with it, and I don't know. Maybe if I'm really bored during the summer, I'll take a crack at it and go over all this and try and rewrite a bunch of it, because I just think it's a mess, and it's to think it's okay is. It's not fair to the players in the league. You know, they play a hard-fought series right to Game 7, and they can't get a substitution that they really need and probably should get, from what I'm reading the rule as. They should have been able to use a roster player, and they couldn't because it was interpreted by someone or a few people, and the interpretation was the best that they could have done at the time, but based upon the crap that's written here.
And
but the thing is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and the pitchforks are going after one particular person, and
Sure.
I think that's a little unfair, because obviously he's reading these rules just like we are,
Right.
and like we said, everybody's got their own interpretation, so it's easy for a mistake like this to happen.
Right, and at least it wasn't Man-Bear that messed up.
Well, everyone's got their opinion about people who do work in the league, and I get it. I'm not going to ever say that someone doesn't deserve to have their opinion, and it's fine. But my final opinion on this is the BOG they're given this polished turd of a rule book to follow, and I don't blame them for the way it's written and for what they have to do to try and interpret. But I would, and I don't know how exactly this worked out for this one, but I think whenever there are decisions that have to be made in any game, but especially in the playoffs, this is like the NHL. You got to call Toronto, right? You gotta get a bigger group of people on and say, okay, this is a Game 7. We need to have multiple people decide on how this is going to go, and then make that public. And say, here, we made this decision based upon this inquiry. We're telling the entire community this is what we decided to do based upon the way the rule is written. Here are all the people who decide it. Let's not pretend that we're not part of the process. Get your ass out there and take responsibility for what was decided, and don't just lay it on one person. And if there were multiple people involved in the decision, then say that you were involved. Don't hide behind the rule book. And if there weren't, and everyone left it up to this one guy to make a decision, then you left them out hanging to dry, and that's not fair either. So,
wait a minute. You guys ain't trying to tell me that it was Man-Bear that messed this up again, are you?
I am not telling you any one person messed it up. I think.
No,
quite honestly.
it's let's just hope that this is the catalyst for change, and I think it will be, because it's a pretty glaring issue, and it's going to upset a lot of people. It already has, so it's something that has to be fixed now.
The truth of the matter is that, and this is a perfect example of what we've been saying for the past however long now it's been. We're saying all this, and reality is that we may find out in a couple hours or a day or so that we're actually wrong, and you're not allowed to use a roster player. And that's just a perfect example of the fact that the rule book is just like, you don't know if you're coming or going.
Right. Exactly. And so, yeah, hopefully we'll get some more word on this down the road, and that it's a little more clear, and because that really hasn't been addressed, and so hopefully someone will. And if they decide that the rule needs to be cleaned up, and they admit to that, that'd be great. In the end, if nothing else can happen, that's what I'd like to see happen. Say the rule is not clear, rewrite it, and explain it to everybody, and then just move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, all we're expecting is, an apology and maybe a little Subaku, but aside from that, nothing, spectacular.
There you go. So let's get back to actual hockey. The playoff brackets as they stand now, obviously, it's Hershey and the Crunch going up on the East, and Wild and the Heat will face off in the West in those two semifinal matchups. Let's take a look at the expert picks to this point. Our quarterfinal picks were all the same teams. We picked all the same teams, the Bears, the Crunch, Wild, and Heat. But a couple of us had the Heat winning in 6 and had the Wild. Nobody had the Wild winning in any more than 6. And, of course, Vibes had the Crunch winning in 6. Everybody picked the Bears in 6. So pick the teams, but the games and how many games it took is exactly where we were off a little bit. So right now the current standings, as you see, and we're going by the site rules and what we have for scoring, which is you get a point for every correct team. You get 2 points if you pick the right team and the right amount of games that they won by. So we've all made 12 picks. The site may have mine as one less pick, but because I didn't pick one of them up. But anyway, right now I'm up over MG by. Actually, that's not right. I'm up over Vibes. I have Vibes and MG swapped there on the graphic, so I apologize. 2 points over Vibes right now. Vibes has gotten every team correct. He's the only one who's done that, and I want to point that out to him.
Which should be worth more than getting just taking a lucky guess in the amount of games and being right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I mean,
it is pretty
maybe
impressive.
in the league score, but I mean, in reality, I'm probably winning. But okay.
So you're saying that how many games it could take is a lucky guess? You don't think any strategy went into that?
Yeah, you picked a number. That's all it is.
You do some fortune telling on the side too?
Wow. That's not at all. That's not at all biased whatsoever. So anyway, I lead. I got a couple points up on Vibes, with Dead Soul in third, and MG is actually the one who has the score of 11. So he's hit it rough. Only 9 correct teams. Only one of them with the correct amount of games. So as smart as MG sounds most times, these picks are not making him look that smart.
I'm actually worried about him. Where is he today? I hope that the fact that he's always wrong isn't starting to weigh heavy on him or anything like that.
I think he's actually en route from somewhere. And he had a long drive today. He might join us at some point, but we'll see. We'll see if he decides to come on and take a beating for that.
He's en route from being wrong and on his way to being wrong, I guess.
So let's talk about the poll from last week. 8 remaining teams in the playoffs who had the best goalie tandem. The vote went for Moose and myself with 21 votes. 19 votes for Agar and You Can't See Me. 16 for OMG Price and Skyhawk. 13 for Flyers and Trash Clown. And then the remainders pull up. I feel bad for Joja and T-Bod. They got no votes, and yet for Charlotte, may not be the flashiest of goaltending tandems, but they played an incredible series in both of them, and should be commended for how well they played. But in this poll, unfortunately, not getting any votes, and so we just want to acknowledge how good they are. But you know what? I didn't vote for my own tandem because I didn't feel it was right. I actually voted for the Iowa Wild tandem of Price and Skyhawk. Price has just been incredible. His numbers this season are ridiculous, and And Skyhawk. I mean, Skyhawk could be starting on so many more teams in this league. Be the guy who has the best numbers on a team. That's one of the reasons why Iowa could very easily wind up in the finals and could give Stockton a big run for the money. Of course, they've got Flyers and Trash Clowns, so that team is no slouch either. But maybe Iowa and their goaltending tandem could be the edge for them against Stockton.
Yeah, that's a really tough tandem for those guys to go up against with the Heat. I mean, I've got the numbers broken down for a little bit later to get into, but the Heat, like I said before, they're going to have to figure out a way to not only get past the defense, but score on these two guys who are just doing excellent. And with Oh My God Price just being absolutely off the charts with his save percentage and just his play overall. So I think that's going to be one of the. I wouldn't say it's going to be the best series to watch, but to me, I think it's going to be an interesting one that is kind of hard to call. But I think the Wild are going to really have the advantage in that series.
We'll take a look at the vote that we have up right now on the LG website. It's closing a little after 9:30 tonight, and that is, what do you feel would be the best finals matchup? And this is basically, maybe the two teams you feel deserve to be there, maybe the matchup that you would like to see happen because you think would be the most fun to watch. So we've got Wild Bears, Wild Crunch, Heat Bears, Heat Crunch. So obviously those are the four different matchups that can happen. Right now, with 14 votes is Wild and Crunch, and then with 13 votes, Heat and Crunch. Wild Bears at 7 votes, Heat Bears at 6 votes. And so I'm not surprised to see a matchup between the Wild and the Crunch being the one that people really want to see. I think those are two well put together teams. They didn't have a lot of fanfare during the trade deadline necessarily, made a few moves, but nothing big, and just rode the wave, and maybe are a testament to keeping team chemistry together and riding it all the way to the at least the semifinals for these guys. Let's move on to the playoff matchups that we have coming up, and let's start with the Bears and the Crunch. I know we talked a little bit about them and about the matchups that are about the games that are upcoming. Of course, tonight, Game 1, only one game being played tonight at 9:30. Bears and Crunch, and then at 10:30, Stockton and the Wild. The Bears have not had good luck with the Crunch this season. They have lost all three matchups against the Syracuse Crunch, 4-1, 6-2, and then 4-1 just recently, a couple of weeks ago, towards the end of the season. If you look at the numbers for the matchups, 14 goals to 4 in favor of the Crunch so far. Time on attack is close. The Bears with a little bit more. A few more shots on goal for the Crunch, but if you look at some of the basic numbers, it looks like the Crunch have had the best of the Bears this season. And in his last game against the Bears, Lobo Dangles just had a tremendous game. Obviously, a lot of talk about whether or not he's playing a lot of tough teams, but Lobo played the Bears back on April 4th and had the hat trick and an assist, and playing with JMM and Nazi, just having a great game, and going up really against a great lineup that night of Nismo, Swagger, Mafia up front, D. Mitch and Babata back on D with Moose and net, and yet Syracuse handled them pretty well. So I see a lot of Hershey picks being made, guys, but I'm not so sure it's going to be as clear-cut as people think. Personally, I think these teams match up really well, and quite honestly, I can see where anybody else would say, I don't know what Hershey's capable of yet because they haven't played a tough enough team, so I would pick the Crunch. I'm going to say this matchup's going to go 7, and I've got to pick the Bears, or else I'm Bob will be screaming at me for the rest of the day.
Well, I broke things down a bit like I did last week there, and this is obviously so far how each team has performed in the playoffs. Again, I'll point out that the Crunch, I believe, had the harder opponents overall, so some of their numbers are a little bit lower than the Bears coming in, but I think that's going to factor into it. Plus, what's interesting about the Crunch series versus the Bears is that there was a couple guys, Diecast and Smoothie, who were playing with the Crunch who are no longer with them, and they were in those winning games. Will that be a factor of a differential for that team? I don't think so. I think they're going to have the guys that they have in their place are going to do the job just as well, if not better, especially having a little bit more time to play together, practice together. But to do a really quick breakdown here, we got the Bears with a 26.5% power play over the Crunch's 22.2. We've got 66.7% on the penalty kill for the Bears, whereas the Crunch were 72.2%. So they've got the advantage there. 1547 time on attack to 1604 time on attack for the Crunch. Shot differential for the Bears was plus 24, with the Crunch being a plus 18. So the Bears shooting a little bit more in their series, again, against probably less tougher opponents. And then we've got the Bears at 49.7% face-off, and the Crunch at 48.8. So that's pretty close. The penalty minutes for the Bears were 30 overall and 42 for the Crunch. So the Crunch are going to need to stay out of the penalty box. They're going to have to be a lot more disciplined, like the Bears have been in their games. But ultimately, this isn't an easy game to call. Let's see here. I'll just give you a couple more numbers. I think the Crunch, they're going to obviously need to stick with Be Nice, like I said before, because let's face it, he's 7-1-0. He's faced 101 shots. He's got an 89.1 save percentage average with just 11 goals against in 8 games, which is pretty crazy. So that's an astounding 1.38 goals against average. That's no easy feat for you guys to face. Obviously, he's just been on fire for during the playoffs for this team. He's their main man, and they're going to have to hope that Mitruk will step it up big time, because right now he's looking at a 1-2-0 record with 17 goals against and 48 shots, and only a 64.6 save percentage. So that's a 5.64 goals against average. That's not so great. They're going to have to make sure that whoever they put in front of Mitruk for his game, that he's obviously going to have to play at least one of them, they're going to have to put their strong defenders, and their team defense is going to have to be top notch for that game, unless he somehow really steps it up big time. But they got to be careful with that. Bears, you guys have hands down have the best goalie tandem in this series, without a doubt. Both of you guys have been excellent. You're both very experienced with you and Moose, T-Sibs, obviously very experienced with this overall with LG. But again, you guys haven't had the tougher opponents overall. Mm-hmm. But let's see here. Moose, he's sitting with a 6-1-0 record with an 83.9 save percentage, 15 goals against on 93 shots. That's a 2.15 goals against average. And Sibs, you've been going 2-1-0 with an 81.4 save percent average and 8 goals against on 43 shots with a 2.67 goals against average. So you guys have both been excellent for your team. And obviously that's going to be a huge factor for you guys, along with your team defense and your defense overall. I think, actually what I broke it down, overall the Bears are at 2.3 goals against average for their entire playoff series, and the Crunch are at 2.55 goals against. So you guys have the upper hand there and overall, but again, you're going up against a much tougher opponent in all categories, I think, than everything else that this is your biggest test by far, I think, for everything so far. And it's a tough one to call. I mean, you guys have the advantage of the goalies. The series has been won by the Crunch. But if I have to make a pick, it's a tough one. I don't know. For me, I have to say it's probably going to be the Crunch in 7. And even then, it's hard to say that. But I think the Crunch will be able to take you guys down. But it'll have to be determined in the 7th round.
Vibes?
The Bears don't get the credit that they deserve. The Bears are a lot better than people talk about them. They got a really good forward group. They're led by some really dynamic forwards who also understand the game and know how to put a team together. They have a pretty substantial defense, and as Dead Soul alluded to, they have by far the better goalie tandem in this series. But the best goaltender in this series is probably Be Nice. It's it's a really tough series to pick because I could see this one going either way, really. But ultimately, I think that Machuk drops his 2. And that's why I think that this goes 6. Maybe I could see 7. But I'm going to take the Syracuse Crunch in 6.
I did want to point one other thing out that I didn't before, is that those 3 losses that the Bears did have was with Moose in net, surprisingly, especially with his excellent goaltending thus far. But it seems like the Crunch have his number. So the question I have going forward with this is, do they rely heavily on Moose as they have throughout the series, or do they throw a little bit of a tandem going back and forth between Sibs and him, because they seem to have his numbers? So I'm curious to see what their little game plan is with that, because they should think about that. It's something that they can't ignore. I don't think those 2 players that were not in the on the team anymore are going to factor in heavily. I think it's going to come down to the goaltending and the defense. So I'm curious to see how the Bears are going to play this.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Vibes.
I was just going to ask you, did we get your number of games? Because I know you picked the Bears. Did you give it games?
Yeah, I gave 7.
Oh, you said 7? Okay.
I should write these down because I don't want to have to listen to the show again. So Dead Soul said Crunch in 7. Okay, and of course I said Bears in 7. And what was your pick there, Vibes?
I said Crunch in 6.
Okay. We'll look at the other series of the Wild and the Heat. It is again another solid matchup. Of course, we've seen the Wild have to deal with the Moose and the Checkers. The Heat handily taking care of the Golds in round 1 and struggling up to a final Game 7 overtime victory against the Texas Stars. And so, again, 2 teams here that are pretty evenly matched. In this series, it's the Wild that have won 2 out of 3 games. A couple of games were relatively close. The one Stockton win was a 5-1 win in their second matchup of this season. The numbers are pretty similar all the way through, except more penalty minutes for the Wild. But obviously close on goals, 10-9. On shots, on hits, on time of attack is only about 45 seconds difference in that for the 3 games. So these are 2 teams that we've seen have some things in common. They are very good at moving the puck up and down. They are very good at passing, at quick passing, and setting up their wingers to be able to have good opportunities. So I almost feel like, with the goaltending that both of these teams have and the defense, that this kind of gives the both teams' offensive lines a chance to fly up and down the ice, and we may see a very wide open style of play in this one. Before I give my final pick on this one, I'm going to let the other guys talk about it first. We'll start with Vibes on the Wild and Heat matchup coming up.
Well, I mean, these teams are 1 and 2 in a lot of statistical categories through the playoffs. I mean, they're a pretty evenly matched team. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm not giving my pick yet, right? We're gonna hold off a little bit, but
you can. I'm just waiting because I'm still deciding.
Oh, so you want? Yeah, so you put me out there. No, you know what? I'm gonna let Dead Soul go first. Dead Soul.
Well, I gotta talk about a couple things before I get right into my pick, because it might also give you guys a little bit of help with your decisions. I did do a little quick breakdown with some of the the stats thus far throughout the playoffs, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, the Wild have the advantage in almost every single category except for faceoffs. And basically, starting with their power play, they're at 34.4% for the Wild. as the Heat are only at 19.4% on the power play.
Wow.
The Wild have a PK of 80.8%, a huge advantage to the 73.7. So I wouldn't say it's huge, but it's a pretty good glaring one. But the power play advantage is pretty enormous in comparison. The time on attack differential is another big advantage that they've had with the Wild there, 47 minutes, 51 seconds, to the Heat's 19:49. There's been a plus 92 shot differential advantage that goes to the Wild over the 46 shot differential for the Heat. The face-offs were the Wild were at the slight disadvantage at 53.7 to the Heat's 56.4. Now, I put hits in here because the Heat actually hit quite a bit. They had 101 hits, and the Wild had 73 hits. And obviously, people can argue whether hits are something that can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on when you do them, whatnot. I think in this, the Heat are gonna have to tame their hitting unless they really have a perfect kind of way of doing it, where they're gonna maintain the puck or get it back and cause turnovers. So if that's gonna help them, then great. But otherwise, tone that down. That's gonna screw you guys if you play against the Wild like that too much. And then I got the Wild with 62 penalty minutes and the Heat with 44. So the Wild do take quite a bit of penalties and quite a bit more overall than the Heat have. So the Heat seem to be a more disciplined team. Now here's where it gets a little bit more interesting as well. The Wild have had 2 shutouts so far in the overall series that they've played, in all of them, and the Heat have had 1. And the Wild are sitting at a 1.44 goals against average throughout all of the playoffs right now, where the Heat are at 2.91 goals against. So right there, it tells you that the Heat, you got to be defensive in this game, obviously, with a defensive team, and you clearly got to score as many goals as you can with these guys, but they're not going to make it easy. They've not made it easy for any of the teams that they've gone against, and all of them have really brought it to them. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see these two kind of go together. But I think the Wild and the Heat series looks to be one of the most exciting. Will it be a defensive battle, or will it be an offensive onslaught from both teams? The Wild hold the series advantage 2-1. And so the question is, will the long-time chemistry and well-seasoned Wild be able to stave off the Heat and put out their flames? Or will the Heat burn through the defense of the Wild and tame the Wild for good? I guess we'll have to find out. And my pick, even though we all said that the dark horse might be the Heat, which, I think they could pull this off. If any team was going to do it to beat the Wild, I think they can do it. But I'll be the first to say I'm probably going to have to go with the stats on this one and go with the Wild in 7.
Well, I'll make my pick now, and I totally agree with you, Dead Soul. I think there's a ton of talent on Stockton, and they can beat anybody at any time. But I just think the Wild have put together a tremendously solid team up and down. Price is incredibly hot and goaltender right now, and won 2 games, won both of his games against them earlier this year. I got to go with the Wild in 7 as well. I've been leaning towards the Wild, and Stockton may very well prove me wrong, but it looked like in the 3 games they played, it was Ajax, Djax, and Jason up front for Stockton, who were able to play well against him in their 1 win against the Wild. But I don't know if I don't know if anyone else is going to have the same kind of success. Stockton's best opportunity is to make this a fast-paced game, and the Wild. I just think the Wild have too much talent. Will be able to handle that, and they have an attack that goes the other way very quickly. I was watching Zach the other night. How quickly he could be playing the point on defense, and as soon as the puck is turned over, he is already heading down the other way. He's able to blow past people that way, and they have a few forwards who have that capability, obviously. So I'm going to take the Wild in 7. I think I think the Wild have a good chance of winning this all, and they've gone up against good competition so far. They know to keep their guard up from Game 1 to Game 7, and I think they take this. Up to you, Vibes.
This one's easy. Give me the Iowa Heat.
Funny. I wanted to reprimand Dead Soul for his puns, his vibe-like puns. It's not his. It's like children. It's not his fault. It's the bad element he's been around with the
Oh,
show.
so I'm a
Off on
bad
me.
influence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
you are. What's your pick there, tough guy?
I'm sorry, I meant the Stockton Wild.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Commitment's always been
Jesus.
your problem, isn't it?
This is so hard, man. This is so hard. I mean, with all the statistical categories that the Wild lead in, they've been there all season. How do you pick against them? So I mean, that being said, don't get involved with anything that you can't leave in 30 seconds flat when you feel the Heat coming around the corner. And that's what we have. The Heat's coming around the corner. Give me the Heat in 6.
Well, there you go. You knew I knew he was going to go against us.
I had a feeling too. Maybe just wants to go against the grain. But you know what? For me, looking at the game against the Stars, which were obviously they're a great team overall, put up a good fight back and forth. But to see those kind of goals against on both sides, you can't. I mean, the Wild, they're a different team, yes, but they can't play that kind of game against them, and they're going to have to come in scoring quick, early and often, and keeping them off the board. And I don't know. The Wild, I've played them. I've seen them play enough. They've been around together enough that they know how to stop these kind of teams. And if the Heat don't come well prepared with a real game plan for these guys, they're not going to be able to get through them.
Did you guys not just catch my awesome movie reference? I mean, that was amazing.
No,
I'm half asleep, to be honest.
I may not have heard it, but I probably also had no interest in listening. So you can repeat it now. We'll listen.
Let's hear it.
I talked about how good the Wild were all season, but then I said don't get involved with anything you can't leave in 30 seconds flat when you feel the Heat coming around the corner.
Oh, isn't that what's it called? Gone in 60 Seconds or no, Fast and Furious or some shit? I don't know.
Fast and the Furious.
I don't know.
If
done.
it's
I'm done. I
if
want
it's
out.
any one of those car, we're all gonna,
I've recognized that, but
slide
I
around
know
the
I've
streets.
totally. I've
It's
messed it
the
up. I could've-
movie Heat. It's the movie
Oh, yeah,
Heat.
yeah.
Val
Heat.
Kilmer, Robert De Niro.
No,
It's a
Didn't
great
watch
movie.
it.
I should have known.
Didn't watch it.
90s.
That's not my. I'm more of a Notebook kind of guy.
Notebook kind of guy.
No, I'm not. But I'm not watching that. I just. You're a lot more of a you're a lot more of a man than I am. So I have to admit that.
I'm sorry. No, you're right. I probably should have watched Still Magnolias or whatever it was instead.
Look, you can't even say the title, and I'll cry. So please don't mention it again. That's it. Those are our picks. So Dead Soul takes the Crunch and the Wild in 7. I picked the Bears and the Wild in 7. And Vibes, Crunch in 6, Heat in 6. We'll see. We'll see how accurate that is. And obviously, good luck to everybody starting tonight. We're going to try and cover some of these games during the week, possibly on Tuesday. Definitely, if there are any Game 7s, we will cover those as well. And next week, we're going to cover every final game live that night. So we'll talk more next week on the show. But we did want to mention one more thing before we take off. Actually, maybe two more things. The first mention is about awards coming up at the end of the season. We have a committee that I'm heading up of a bunch of folks, including the two knuckleheads here on the show with me. And so we are in the process now of nominations. We're looking at a bunch of different stats. We got some great help from the statistician to help put together a lot of information that's useful. Now we're going back and doing our own research, and so it's a process that we're going through right now. The final vote will be by committee, and that'll happen, I believe, in a week or two. We're going to wind up doing that. We're going to be having a show to announce the winners. It's not going to be announced on the website. We're going to do it live on a show during the week of AHL bidding. Don't have a date nailed down just yet, but we figure that's a good time for folks to be able to. They're going to be interested in what's going on with the bidding, and so we'll go on live with the show and talk about that. But we're working hard to try and get out the awards and really take into account all the nominations and all the guys who played so well this season for their teams and have put up decent numbers, but are also been contributing to the league on a constant basis too. So. Lots to talk about as we get along, but we're working on that now, and I know everyone has some thoughts and ideas about awards. We've already heard a lot of people in the shout box talk about who they think is the best goalie, who's the best forward, who isn't a scrub hunter. So, well,
can I add something?
Yeah.
I actually wanted to add something too. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to put it out there that this will be the first time ever in the LG universe here that, or at least on the PSN side, it will not be a popularity contest. It will not be just basically, who's on the top of the stats today. And the statistician is coming in with some crazy, like he's crunching the numbers like never before with all the matchups. It's unbelievable. This is going to be a really well done, well thought out, and very, a lot of different people's voicing their opinions, and it's going to be, I think, the best so far, so that will truly represent those that actually had excellent seasons and contributed, and I think this is going to be really exciting making this all happen.
You had something to say, Vibes?
Oh, well, I mean, he kind of hit it on the head. I just wanted to state and I guess reiterate now how thorough and how intensive this whole process is. I mean, I had to pull out my calculator. I almost got in trouble for not doing my homework. All right, so it's really thorough, it's really intensive, and we're honestly the committee's going above and beyond. So if at the end of this process you got something that you don't like about it or whatever, I mean, just pick something and jump off of it, because we're definitely doing the work.
Do the math yourself, really. That's what we could suggest to these people, because the fact is, we're going heavy on the stats with this, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and some of them are going to be based on. There are a couple of awards that have to do with management, that have to do with people who have contributed to the league, and giving them recognition based upon what we've dealt with, and being part of the media. Look, we've talked to a lot of different people along the way. We are living and breathing the league to a certain extent every day, and so we see the people who are contributing, and we want to try and give a shout out to the ones who are a positive influence in the league, and who are not just, frankly, shit talkers in the shout box. Those people we have no use for, and so we want to recognize the ones who are doing positive things in the league, and are dedicated to playing the right way, and to just be part of a team. And that means more to the owners, the GMs, the AGMs. That means more to those guys who have to run the team than anything else. And so I think we're off to a really good start, and hopefully we'll have some more information as we get along here about where we are with the process, and again, we're not naming any names until we actually, have the winners and we have the show. It's a little bit lackluster to do it just on the website. So we want to make a show out of this. We want to actually announce winners and hopefully even get them on to talk to us about their experience, and give them sort of an acceptance speech platform. So it'll be fun to do, and I hope you guys will be able to join us for that show. More on that, and the date's coming out soon. Anything final to add, guys, as we head into our semifinal matchups tonight?
Just a little soliloquy. Moose, 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 moose.
Oh, wow! He's gonna love you now. He's gonna want to play for you next season.
I owe it to him. I'm sorry. He's been waiting for all that forever. So, moose, 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 moose.
Wow.
Good luck to you guys. Good luck to all the teams tonight.
Thank you. Vibes?
Dead Soul's getting better and better at this. He's getting really good.
I'm
starting
just
to become a
deliriously
fan.
tired, man. I'm just out of my mind right now.
Maybe that's
so.
what you need.
Well, you shouldn't sleep ever again then.
Yeah, I think that's probably the answer.
Well, no MG. He's had to fill in more time, so. And that's
I just
bad,
hope he's okay.
that's
I
bad
just
for
hope
you.
MG's all right.
Bad for you, Vibes, because MG has been like on your ass lately, and it's been fun to watch.
Well, he's making me famous, so.
No, I think you do a pretty good job of that on your own. I think for every individual who thinks you're a complete dick, that's all you. That's all your work. I think you should be proud of it.
They just need to get to know me. That's all.
Okay, if you say so, I'll let you know when I get to that point. All right, well, we're gonna wrap this one up. I think we have said enough for today, and we are awaiting games tonight. Semifinals coming up. No lineups out yet, but we'll hopefully see some stuff soon. But I think we'll definitely be in for a couple of really good games.
Can't believe you guys never saw the movie Heat.
Yeah.
Great movie.
If you guys say so. T-Sibs, Dead Soul Vibes saying so long, and we will talk to you all next week.